What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Art of Suffering podcast with Dalton Darnell. Today we have Josh McElroy, and I do know this guy. I met him at a clinic a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me a little bit about his story and some of the things he's done. And I have no doubt we will dive into just copious amounts of great and terrible suffering that Josh has endured in his career choices. I am sure the lessons to be learned from these things are nothing short of biblical. So, Josh, thanks for coming on, man. I sure do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man.
So let's get started. Kind of where you're from, what you grew up doing, like what was life like when you were young, that sort of deal.
So I grew up preacher's kid. We kind of bounced around Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, um, with churches. My dad was a cowboy and preached, and then uh, I guess one of his deacons at the church that he was pastoring when I was born, um, became kind of like my godfather. I'd go spend any moment I could on his ranch up in the Oklahoma Panhandle. Um, so I grew up from the time, heck, before I could walk, I was in the saddle, and then uh, grew up kind of bouncing from church to church as pastors kind of tend to do. They're like football coaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did that, and then day worked for a lot of folks. Worked sale barns when I was in heck, I started working sale barns when I was 9 with my godfather, and then um, started. Dad started buying me young horses, and I'd start them and resell them, and so did that all the way up through into high school, kind of.
Okay.
Um,
What? Now, let me ask you this. Um, would this have been in the '90s, or how old are you?
I'm 44 this year, so between the 80s and 90s, I kind of crossed that generation.
Okay. What was it like being a preacher's kid back then? Kind of. What was that like? What was your dad like?
Um, my dad's one of the greatest, most godly men I've ever known. And a lot of I think if you ask my sisters, they would probably give you a different story because he was at a different spot in his life when they grew up. I'm the youngest,
Mm-hmm.
so and my closest sister to me is 9 years older than me, so they kind of grew up in a little different time with him. But like kind of the typical pressures you would feel from uh, being a pastor's kid and having to be perfect and,
Perfect.
and dad's job kind of relies on you. I didn't feel those as much growing up. Like I heard the stories, um, but I didn't feel those as much growing up because kind of by the time I was, you know, 8, 9 years old, I was kind of an only child. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Were you a bad kid?
no, I mean I don't guess I was a bad kid.
Typical boy.
Yeah, typical boy. My
Yeah.
my sisters are still irritated because I didn't have the same curfew they did, that kind of thing. And Dad's only
Mm-hmm.
answer was, "He's a boy and you're not." Um, so uh,
Classic.
that was kind of what that was. But and Dad also gave me the freedom to kind of choose what I was going to do once I hit 16. I wasn't required to go to the same church he and Mom went to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess and the typical small town high school kid going out pastor parties with friends and that kind of thing. But um, I don't guess I was a bad kid. I never got into any trouble with the law or anything like that. Um, I was an ADHD kid before there was really a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I kept pretty busy doing stuff, and uh, whether it was showing steers or roping or you know training horses, whatever it was, I kind of stayed pretty busy doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Did your dad pressure you to stay busy, or you just kind of like that?
um, it was, I don't guess it was pressure from dad. It was just kind of always an expected thing, and then I'd probably pressure more from mom. Like if dad walked outside, mom would be like, "Go."
Mm-hmm.
Um, she always said he's not going to beg you to go spend time with him or go do stuff, but if he walks out that door to go do something, you better be with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I appreciate that very much now because that he and I became very close just because I was out there working with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I appreciate that now, but I don't think it was ever a pressure from him to be out there
Yeah.
and do stuff. It was just kind of what I enjoyed doing. So
Was he a preacher of a specific type of church?
we grew up kind of Southern Baptist,
Yeah.
um, and then I basically kind of stayed in the Baptist side there. There was a couple of churches that weren't necessarily Southern Baptist Convention churches, but we basically kind of stayed in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, I think the last church he pastored for a while, like the ministry, I guess, started to wear on him. And me being young, I didn't really see that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But he stepped away from the ministry while I was in junior high and high school, and did other jobs. Became the technology director for one of the northern part of the Texas Panhandle, and kind of created that position out of his own pocket. And then worked at the high school that I went to. And so he wasn't in the ministry then. We still attended the church, and he still helped out, but he wasn't the pastor then. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't start pastoring again until heck after I joined the military.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was still cowboying, but he pastored. I guess it was one of the first or second church that he ever pastored out of seminary. He ended up going back to work at a ranch up there near that church, and they needed a pastor, so he kind of did both then. But
Mm-hmm.
that break, I really wasn't in that pastor's kid role, I guess, where you would see most of the pressures
Yeah.
come. I was real young in it, and then I saw it, looking back, but I don't guess I remember it really being a pressure on me growing up.
So you had a really good foundation of uh, probably biblical truth or the Gospels before you joined the military.
Yeah, yeah. I was raised with biblical truths, and my dad has always been a very deep thinker, and so his approach to theology uh, was very much, if it's in the Bible, you need to understand everything about that context, historical context, why it was said, when it was said, um, and that kind of thing. And so I kind of absorbed that growing up, and I think that's kind of where that foundation was laid.
Man, what a gift. That's a gift. That's
Yeah,
freaking awesome. I didn't
yeah.
learn till recently that the reason why Matthew is written in such kind of legalistic language is because Matthew was a Jew talking to Jews, and he was speaking to them kind of in their own tongue. And I mean, it changes everything about the way you perceive what you're reading in the context of which it was writ is so important. I mean,
Oh yeah.
that's key, man. It's not just it's who they're talking to and why that really helps kind of paint the picture of that. That's really cool, man. That your dad sounds like an awesome guy. So he's still around, he's still preaching and cowboying.
No, he's 70, I guess 77 now. And he still does. I think he's a teaching pastor now for the Southern Baptist Convention down there in near Lubbock. They live in a little town called Crosbyton. Um, but he kind of hung up the Spurs about oh 8 9 years ago. Was just my mom's health was kind of deteriorating, and he's always had bad eyes. Like he was 4F from Vietnam uh, because he had astigmatism real bad. Um, that was kind of how I knew he was pissed off at me because he wears glasses all the time. And if I could see his eyes jump through his glasses, I knew that I needed to. They needed to be
You
yes sir,
needed
no
to
sir.
tighten her up.
Yeah, I had to tighten it up. Um, but his eyes started to really kind of bother him, and with mom's health challenges, they just couldn't live that cowboy life anymore. So he kind of hung that up.
Mm-hmm.
But when he and I'll still talk, and he kind of gets to live vicariously through me, and you know we talk cattle markets and yearlings and rope horses and that kind of thing, and he gave me all his gear
Mm-hmm.
um, that he had accumulated over the years. Like I've got a John Williamsma saddle that I guess would probably be worth 10 grand now. Um,
Man, that's awesome.
that he rode for years and had John make for him. Probably one of the last few he made in the early 2000s. But he gave me all that gear, and so he kind of has stepped away from that cowboy side of it. He can still ride when he needs to, but he just doesn't do it now with his health and mama's health.
It's going to end for all of us, man. Like we're
Yep.
all going to hang the spurs up at some point, and it's really cool. I think a lot of guys, a lot of cowboys, they find their identity in that work. And it's really cool to hear a guy that was willing to hang it up when he needed to, based on his family, his wife's health, and all that stuff is perishable, man. Like just being a cowboy is not enough. It's not
Oh yeah.
enough. But it is a really fun job while you got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I was very blessed in that we see so many kids especially in the ranching community, these older ranchers, I guess, in the baby boomer generation, all their kids grew up hearing was how tough life was, and they they never heard how lucky they were to be able to step in the saddle, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how lucky they were to be stewards of the land and God's creation. That's what I heard. Um, we, you bitch and moan about it being, you know, 22 degrees below zero in the Texas Panhandle with wind blowing 30 miles an hour in January. Um, but you were still up to see the sunrise, and there was still open enough country that you couldn't see a telephone pole, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the benefits that he gave to me, was that even though I chose to do other stuff in my life, that it wasn't something that I never wanted to come back to. Like I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to go get a degree and never see the place again.
Yeah. So this kind of that now that start me off. So we're finishing high school and decided to join the military. And you said your dad he got passed over for Vietnam because of his stigmatism, correct? So he
Mhm.
was not in the military.
No, sir. His one of his younger brothers served in the Marines, kind of during that interwar period. But I I originally straight out of high school wanted to join the Army. And when I went to talk to the recruiter that came to the school, um, I was honest with them when they said, "Or do you have any medical conditions?" And I had asthma pretty bad growing up. Um, and then I got, "Well, you can't join." Um, and so that was off the table. And I was a pretty fair public speaker. Our high school had a really good speech and theater program, and so I thought that might have been the way I would go. And I got some scholarships to go to college uh, on speech and theater side, and so I thought I was going to do that. And what I realized was that I was. It took me a little while, but I realized that I was not the college type.
Yeah, me neither.
Um, uh, I quickly learned that you could go party on a Tuesday, and nobody was going to force you to go to class. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did not go to class, and uh, it was sort of the unraveling of that whole deal where I was failing all my classes and I lost all my scholarships. That I was like, I got to go do something else. And I was working at a car dealership, and one of the guys that I was working with at the car dealership talked about the army, and I was like, well, I'd go try to do that. And I'd been thinking about it, and then it was kind of in that interim window that 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that happened in September, and I was like, I'm gonna finish this semester, but then I got to figure out something else to do. And come spring semester, I called the recruiter and I was like, hey, how fast can you get me out of here?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so,
At that time, pretty fast.
yeah, turns out that they needed a few folks.
Yeah, right.
So I went into the recruiter's office, and I scored pretty high on that test that ASVAB test you take, and they're like, oh, well, you can do 214 jobs in the United States Army, and then I was pretty excited, and then they gave me all the color vision tests, and I couldn't see a dadgum one of them. Um, I've been My folks always made fun of me for being colorblind because I always say stuff was green or gray, and they were like, "That's not at all correct." Um, and so I took that colorblind test, and they're like, "Oh, you can have 4 jobs." So, uh, and the jobs were it was like tent repair. It tells you how long ago that was. It was a job. Um, Truck driver, um, heavy equipment driver, or a medic. And I told the recruiter, I was like, I'm maybe the smartest guy, but I watch a lot of Sesame Street, and one of these things is not like the other one. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
guys must need medics. Um, and so at the time, they were still trying to sell people that they weren't going to be combat medics. They were going to be healthcare specialists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was smart enough to know that going to war on one front meant that people were probably going to need medics to go out with them, and so I went to basic training and was going to go be a medic uh, after that. And my group of friends that I made in basic training, they were all going to volunteer to go to the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this was when the Ranger Regiment was still very high and tight. The standards were still very strict to get in there. Um, and so I went through. Oh well, I volunteered for the Rangers, and they got me all the way to airborne school, which is a requirement. And they told me that I was disqualified because I was colorblind.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I wasted a lot of time doing this then. And because I had given up my contract to go to Italy, which is what I had signed up for. It was Italy or Germany, I can't remember. But I was standing outside the medical office there, and it looked like a broom closet that we were standing next to, but I guess it was somebody's office. And the guy in the office was like, "What's going on out there?" And they told him that I was colorblind and I couldn't go to jump school. And he said, "Come in here right quick." So I go in there and stand parade rest, and he had two wooden blocks on his desk, and he held them up and he said, "You tell me which one's red and which one's green." I was like, "Oh, red, green, yeah, that's fine." He was like, "Yeah, he can go. It's waiverable." So they let me go
Do you
jump
know
out
who
of
that
planes.
was?
I don't to this day. I was probably one of the like the school surgeon, or the replacement surgeon, whatever. The guy was sitting in the surgeon's office. There was probably the surgeon who was kind of in charge of all the waivers and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought it was dumb because like I had my driver's license, and I didn't see why it was any different than going through a stoplight. I was like, are they like on top and bottom, or like they're different? And they're like, yeah, they're different lights. And I was like, are they like stoplights? And like, yeah. I was like, well, I got my driver's license. Like I can see.
Welcome to the United States Armed Forces.
Yeah. And I was like, and isn't there somebody like at the front whose whole job it is to be like stop and go? Like they tell me to stop and go. And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah. I was like, I don't really see the problem here. I think it was that discussion with the staff that sort of piqued the other guy's interest in being like, well, if he wants to go that bad, we might as well let him.
Yeah.
Um, so then I went, and to be quite honest, like the basic training, and you probably had the same experience, like growing up with a dad who's a cowboy,
Not
like
too bad.
getting hollered at, like
Not a
okay,
problem.
that's
Yeah.
we had people crying and all kinds of stuff. I was like, what? What you
Yeah.
guys? It ain't that bad. Um, and so that wasn't bad at all. And then I went to the what used to be called the Ranger Indoctrination Program, um, and that was significant because their job was to weed everybody out.
hmm What was that? What was that like? I mean, and when was this? So this was like early 2000s?
Yeah, it would have been. I guess I was home from. It would have been January of '02,
Ooh, where was it?
um, or January of '03, because I
Like where
started
in
into.
like
It was
where in the country?
At
Maine?
Benning, at
Benning.
Benning.
In
Yeah,
Georgia. Okay,
yeah,
okay. So it's cold, but it's not like snowing.
yeah. It wasn't terrible. But the the staff there at RIP, they were pretty they were pretty regimented. Like the first day we got there before it even started, we just everybody brought all their gear in, and we were standing on a big concrete pad out in front of the old barracks out there, and we just got the shit smoked out of us for like 2 hours. And I was like, we hadn't even signed in yet, and I was getting smoked, and they had us in what they referred to as our favorite position, was with your feet close to your hands and your hands in a diamond on that concrete, and you would just sit there while they talked, and then you would do however many push-ups and put your nose in the diamond. And I kept falling and bashing my face on the concrete, skinned up the side of my face. And then one time I didn't get up fast enough, and the instructor came over and assisted me with a boot to the ribs
Mm. So
to
this
get
is
up.
back in the day when they can still put their hands on you pretty good.
Yeah, I don't guess they were supposed to, but he must have missed that memo.
Yeah.
Um, ended up being a great guy later on. One best Rangers guy's name's Kevin Nash. Cool dude. Um, he was doing his job, and I was, I guess, not. So then I went. They were like, "Well, the PT test to get in is tomorrow morning." Um, and come to find out, doing sit ups with cracked ribs is not as easy as one might think. Um, so I did not pass the initial PT test to get in because I couldn't sit up on cracked ribs. Um, so then I was placed on worldwide assignment, which was kind of like the you were the low end of the totem pole, like you couldn't make it, so you
hmm
were on worldwide assignment, uh, and I got sent to Korea, which was really fun for me. I was in the only one of two light infantry units in Korea,
hmm
so if we weren't in the field, we'd go spend 6 weeks in the field because we were playing the oppositional force for anybody doing training on the peninsula.
hmm
So whoever they were pretending to fight, it was us. Um, and we'd be 3 to 6 weeks in the field, and if we weren't in the field, we would go hang out in Seoul. Uh, that was like all we did for a year.
So so kind of timeline this for me. So we're going the RIP school is first, and then you
Yeah,
graduate that, and then you go to jump school.
no, jump school's first, so you had to be jump qualified. So I started jump school like late December, I want to say, or like
Okay.
middle December, and then we went home on Christmas break, and then came back and went to to RIP.
So eventually you had to go back and pass RIP.
No, no. Like once I went there and went to Korea, I never went back to the
So
Ranger
you
Regiment.
ended up being, so you're jump certified here. You're a
Yeah.
field medic, but they
Hmm.
got you doing training missions in training guys in Seoul or in Korea.
Yeah, yeah. We were that was not an airborne unit, but I had an airborne slot. So I mean, in the Army, you can be airborne, but not be in an airborne unit. So
Mm-hmm.
I was basically a line and evac medic in Korea, and so just doing I guess what the rest of the Army would consider their medic job, right? You
Yeah.
taking care of your Joes.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for that year, and then uh, one of my platoon sergeants who ended up he was not a good leader at all, um, but I guess it was a blessing in disguise. While I was on mid tour leave in Europe, he took the orders that I had from Korea to Hunter Army Airfield in Georgia. Had had a friend at DA rescind those because he had been in the 82nd and he thought everybody should be in the 82nd. So he had them rescind those orders and gave me orders to the 82nd Airborne.
So where's the 82nd Airborne out of?
It's out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay. And now, so this would be what, year two? Like after Korea, you're working on year two after basic and all that, or were year three?
Yeah, I think I started basic training in well, I turned 21 in the first day of basic training during
Happy
the
birthday.
shark attack. Yeah. And so it that ate up the latter part of uh 2002 with jump school and then uh I think last part of January of '03 I went to Korea, and then I signed in the 82nd Airborne January of '04.
Okay. So now like it seems to me, I never deployed. They deployed while I was in tech school, and then after that we ended up being, and I was just a mechanic, but we ended up being the F-16s that followed Trump around, like the
Oh yeah,
president's guard, that sort of
yeah.
deal. So our guys would go down to Miami or wherever he was, but I was a heavy maintenance, so phase dock is what they called it at the
Hmm.
time, and so I never left, didn't have to because they would just bring him back for a phase because we never went downrange.
Right.
So I never deployed or anything like that. So in year three, is this when you started deploying or started hearing about it? I imagine being in an airborne unit, you were.
Oh yeah. When I got to the 82nd, there were a couple of guys that I'd gone through basic training and airborne with that were in the 82nd at that point. Um, I'll tell you how bad our RIP class was. Of the 60 or 80 guys that came through medic training with us that
Mm-hmm.
went through airborne and then went to RIP, I think 5 of them made it into the regiment.
Good Lord.
And so it was that was a pretty high attrition class. But I showed up and half the because this was right at getting ready to ramp up to the invasion, so there were folks who were just coming back from Afghanistan. There were folks getting ready to go on the invasion, um, and so it was coming. Like Fort Bragg is one of the largest bases in the states, and it was a ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and I wasn't in an infantry unit there. I was in a support unit. And that was where my break with the conventional military happened. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were, I had a first sergeant who had failed special forces selection twice, and so he kind of was pretty salty about it. Um, and they were very concerned that you have a fresh haircut every week. Um, they were very concerned that my hands were in my pockets for longer than 3 seconds to retrieve something. Um, and so we started having some significant friction there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably over that next 4 or 5 months, I kept hearing, well, if you want to go do stuff like that, you can go to Special Forces.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, where do I sign up for that deal? Um, and I had a really good commander uh, come into the unit that I was at, and he ended up being a really solid guy, and so he made me a handshake deal. One of the infantry units was getting ready to go in the fall of '04 to cover the elections in Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so they needed folks to go with them to plus up their numbers, and so I volunteered to go on that one, and I made him a handshake deal that if he'd let me go on there, that I could go to the Special Operations Medical School.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I didn't know where I was going to go. There's civil affairs units were needing people, and so that's kind of how he finagled me a slot. But I knew I was.
I still got you.
I still gotcha. Okay.
I just listened to a podcast on Jocko's deal of a civil affairs guy. I had no clue the craziness that those guys got into over there.
Yeah, those small teams, especially the folks who were, because there at the time there was only a couple of civil affairs units that were attached directly to special operations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the ones that were attached directly to special operations, like they were out there doing some wazoo stuff, and they're small 4-man teams. Like they go out in their 4-man teams um, to be able to give the uh, special operations forces in the area actionable intelligence
Mm-hmm.
to put warheads on foreheads.
So you were a medic on one of those teams?
No, sir.
You went over there with those guys.
I went over to the school, like the special operations and medical school. I think at that time was either 8 or 9 months, and you could go to um, civil affairs. Needed that school. Um, Special forces, they call them the group support battalion, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically you go with the group, but you're nowhere near the the A teams or even the B teams. Um, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and then we had some MARSOC guys come through, and the SEALs would go through, and we would all go through the same school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I started that school with a CA slot, but about 3 months into the school, civil affairs switched their requirements, and I was only an E5 at the time or a sergeant, and you had to be an E6 to hold one of their slots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they were going to send me to the group support battalion after that, and I was like, I definitely do not want that job because that's not doing anything that I want to do.
And they're giving
Um,
flu shots.
yeah, like they were always going to be back at whatever FOB was the main base for all the SF guys, and I was like, I'm just going to be a clinic bitch, and I don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And I was lucky enough that one of the senior medics for the 160th was going through his medical refresher at the same time because they hold that at the schoolhouse as well,
Mm-hmm.
and they were really needing guys. Um, and so me and another guy were interviewed because we were kind of unassigned at that point. So he took us out to dinner and interviewed us. And that was where I was first introduced to the special operations like hiring process. Is it's literally like a job interview. You go in, you talk to them. They they really don't look at your records. They look at you. And he was like, "Yep, I'll offer both you guys a job." Um,
Because
and
is that because you're going to be in there with these like the SEALs and the CA guys and stuff? Like you're going to be the guy, the only guy.
yeah, with the 160th, they act as the infill exfil platform for special operations only.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're not going to be hauling around a conventional force. They are referred to as that ground force commander's asset. And the unit that I ended up going to at First Battalion is the asset specifically for the Tier 1 units in the Army and in JSOC. So our primary customer base was the guys out at the beach at DevGru, and then the guys out at Bragg in Delta. And then
Mm-hmm.
we would fly the Rangers in country because they were operating the same target sets um, as the Tier 1 guys. So that's the mission set for the 160th. But where they need medics is we also act as the Casevac platform.
Mm-hmm.
So if one of those guys gets shot, hurt, blown up, whatever, a conventional medevac that has the red crosses on the sides is not going to go into the middle of a gunfight because
Mm-hmm.
they're unarmored and they don't have any weapons on that aircraft due to Geneva Conventions. Well, we had miniguns on our aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll go land in a gunfight
Mm-hmm.
as I brought my own guns. And so we acted as the primary medical evacuation for those guys. So we had to be trained at the same level medically so that we could take their patients and continue on to get them into a surgeon
Mm-hmm.
at that time. Um, and ended up getting married during this same time frame.
So okay, so medical in the Air Force is like going to the doctor. Okay, it's just like you called it, a clinic bitch. Um, what you're talking about is these guys are going in there fighting. They go down, and then you come in on a helicopter with miniguns and get them out of there. That's your job
Yep.
at the
Yep.
160th.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
It was a lot of fun.
So you did your schooling. You
Yep.
get out of school. All these the CA change, and the guy brings you in. He interviews you, and then they start deploying you into these into. Did you go to Afghanistan? Is that where you went?
Um, my first run with them was Iraq. Like once we got to Campbell, um, I think it was like 4 months or so, 5 months before, because you have to go through their selection and assessment to get
Mm-hmm.
into the unit. Medics very rarely wash out of their selection and assessment because we've already gone through so much stuff prior to getting there that they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to waste a guy who's already school trained. Um, so by the time I got there and I went through what's called Green Platoon, and then got all of my qualifications to be the guy in the back of the helo because we have to be able to set up and rig our hoists on our own. We have to be able to be a fast rope master because there are certain places that they can't land the aircraft. So I've got to fast rope in to get the guy, then put him on a hoist to take him up with me or without me. So we had to go through all those spin ups and training. And then my first run with them was to Iraq. And at the time, I think there were probably, we had 3 battalions operating at that time. And I think there were probably 12 to 15 medics total.
Mm-hmm.
And that's including our senior guys.
How big is a
For the,
battalion?
um, for the air side, it looks a little bit different, but probably 300 to 400 guys.
Oh my
Um,
gosh! So a platoon is the smaller one.
yeah, and in the air, it like on especially for the 160th, they don't really fall under that platoon company regiments like structure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've got your your maintenance company, like the guys that were like you, they were heavy maintainers. They would phase the aircraft. They all that kind of stuff. We had sheet metal guys that were in there. We had our aviation life
Oh, so it's
support.
more like the Air Force then, like
Yeah, no, I mean
structurally.
it's any air wing is going to be structured like that. And but our medics, while we also saw all of the sick call stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we anybody that came in, we saw that. But then we also had to know that if I gave him the wrong medication, I take this pilot out of the rotation and he can't fly.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can't fly, then I got to answer to, at the time, General McChrystal
Oh yeah, you're getting gnawed
as to
on.
why that guy can't fly because I gave him the wrong meds. So
Mm-hmm.
we went through that training. But there were very few of us at that time, and there was really not a lot of time to spin you up on what was supposed to happen, like what
Mm-hmm.
your job was. So that my first day in country, I got off of the rotator in the dark, and my PA and the guy I was replacing came pick me up, started doing kind of the handover. They walked me through signing over all my narcs, and they were like, "Hey, here's this pager." I don't even know if you remember pagers, like if they were a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we had this pager, and they were like, "You're going to be on the day VI force." I didn't even know what that meant at the time. Um, and I was like, "Okay." And they said, "But the pager's broken. Um, so if they need you, we'll come get you. Just go to sleep, rack out. You're going to start in the daytime." I was like, "Okay." What I didn't know was the VI force was the most dangerous mission that both us and the assaulters flew, because everybody else flew at night and our helicopters were black, and so we could kind of get into places. Well, flying during the day, those black helicopters are pretty big targets. Um,
No kidding.
but we would go after kind of the most significant guys on the target deck
Mm-hmm.
who weren't moving at night, or they were in places where we couldn't get in there and get out safely. So we wanted to go ahead and take them out, where they would be driving in a car, and we would follow them to where it was an open spot, and then we'd stop the car. And if they chose to fight, then they probably died, or the Joey chose to surrender, and then they went off to jail. Um, but I didn't know any of this at the time, and so I'm asleep in our little wooden hooch over there on our camp in Balad, and this pager goes off, and it's got ones all across it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what that means. And they said the pager's broken, so I roll over and go back to sleep. Pager goes off again, ones, and I don't. Again, they're like, I was like, if somebody needs me, they'll come get me. Like my flight helmet's still in the bag, like my weapon's still in its case. Like I'm just waiting for morning. And uh, third time, I'm woken up by somebody like knocking on the door, and it was basically just plywood screwed together by the CBs
Yeah.
that made these hooches. And so like the whole room is shaking by this guy pounding on the door. And like I get up and open the door. He's like, "You're the new medic, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Birds are spinning. We're waiting on you, dude. Get your ass out of bed. Let's go." I was like, what? Okay. And so I look like a traveling gypsy camp, like running out to the aircraft with my helmet still in my bag and like trying to unscrew my weapon, get it out of the case, stuff everything up underneath my seat so it didn't fly out while we're going somewhere. And uh, we launched out of there like right at sunrise to go and pick up our assault force um, down in Baghdad, because they were at a different camp, probably like 45 miles south of Balad. Flew in there to pick them up, and like troop commander, troop sergeant major, and the radio guy get on my bird, and one other guy get on my bird, and like three or four more guys get on the other bird. Um, and the troop sergeant major, who's an E9, um, he
Gosh.
look he looks at me and he's like, "All right, Doc, we're short guys because everybody got pulled out late last night, so we're short guys on this assault. You're going to be on the left side with the RTO, the radio guy. He's like, if we go actions left, he's going to go driver, engine, tires. You're going to go tires, engine, driver." And he like puts his fist out to fist bump me, and I'm like, fist bump? I have no idea what's going on.
What?
I look at the radio guy, and he goes, "It's your first run on Davy I?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "All right, man. Sit here next to me." He goes, "They never go actions left. Don't worry about it. But whatever. If for some reason they go actions left, you start at the tire and then put a couple of rounds in the tire, then put some in the engine block, and then transition to the driver because the driver was going to die. At this time, the driver was dying on every run. Like we were shooting that guy no matter what. Um, and so I was like, uh, okay. I had never pulled the trigger in combat. I'd been with the 82nd, but I'd just been shot at. I hadn't actually shot. And so we're flying out to go get this guy, and we're flying along this road. And for us, it was when we start turning sideways, like everything was going. They at 1 minute they're gonna the troop commander, the guy who's in charge, he's gonna call it. It's execute, execute, execute.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we get the 1 minute. He goes to execute, 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 and we start turning sideways. So our guys on the right, who were the assaulters, they have sniper rifles that are 308 caliber, so that they can punches better. They're getting ready to put rounds in the engine block and the driver to stop this vehicle, and I'm looking out the left hand side, like, oh, this is Iraq. All right, cool, like desert, and I'm not even really paying attention, and the aircraft just pitches straight up, like somebody hit the brakes, Top Gun style. We pitch straight up and we pitch over, and the crew chief starts hollering, actions left, actions left. So like any good soldier, like I'm echoing the command, right? Actions left. And I'm like, oh shit, that's me. Like I'm supposed to be shooting now. Like this is crazy. Um and like we're now shooting, and my Romeo element, their RTO is already like he's putting a couple of rounds in the windshield, and like I had never shot out of a moving helicopter before, so I didn't really understand the ballistics of doing 80 knots on forward and the car doing 60, 70 miles an hour and trying to shoot in front of it. So like I'm shooting and it's like landing behind the car. I was like, oh, like you really have to lead this, and so like uh
What?
I I finally, I think I hit one of the wheel wells, and like I see the spark. I'm like, oh, that's how you shoot at cars. And then the aircraft pitches up again. And what had happened was that the high tension electric wires had crossed the road. So, and they had to switch so that the wires were on the other side of the aircraft so that they could turn into the car if they needed to. Um, and then they crossed the road again. So like I shot like 6 rounds and one hit a tire. Um, and they pitch back over. They do the stop, kill the driver. A couple of guys jump out. They try to shoot. Our minigun on that side just goes and smokes everybody. And uh, so that was my that was day one on deployment with the regiment.
What the heck, dude? Bro Dog couldn't have warned you?
That
Like,
and it was at that time that I figured out like they had so much respect for the unit and the people in the unit, like our customer base, whatever they were, that they assumed that if they fist bumped me, I was executing just like they were. Like they didn't have any qualms about telling this guy, "Hey, tires, engine, driver, go." And I was like, "Oh crap, I've got to step my game up because like this is the level of expectation that these guys have of us just because we're here."
gosh,
So,
that's crazy.
and then from then on, it was we were still short guys, so we were doing 60 on, 60 off, uh, high fiving
60
on the
days, 60
yeah
hours,
60
days.
60 days. Yeah.
Shoo.
And where a conventional unit, they would be gone for a year, right? They're out there, but they might be out once a day, once every 3 days, going out on patrol or whatever, unless it was one of the big operations like Fallujah or Ramadi or something like that, where they were kind of getting in every day. But every time we would go, we would we would be flying every single day. Like unless there was bad enough weather that kept our aircraft out of the air, our guys were getting in gunfights every day. sometimes 3 and 4 targets in gunfights every day.
Man, that's crazy. See, you got married before this.
Yeah, my long-suffering wife, who did not know what she was getting into, was at home, and uh, I was had started that pace. So we would do 60 on, 60 off, and then when we were home, we still had all the training requirements. So I think the longest I was at home and the entire time I was assigned there was probably 3.5 weeks.
Gosh, dang it. And you're still married today?
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's
And
rare, isn't it?
yeah, the divorce rate for special operations is 40% from statistics, but it's probably much higher than that.
Man, that's wild. That is
Yeah.
wild. Now, did any of this stuff you were doing over there conflict with your beliefs in God?
No. Um, and I kind of I would lump guys into, like, especially in the special operations community, there are guys who are, almost everybody there is very cerebral, very, like, they're professional warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're almost everybody believes in God. Um, Now there's some folks that don't, but almost everybody believes in God. So it was like the guys who were the Crusaders, like that's kind of how they saw the mission set. Um, and then there were guys uh, who just, they were in the army, and this is what we're executing. Um, so I don't think, and I think a lot of people struggle with that moral injury side of it. And much more so, I believe, in the conventional units that were living in and among the populace, because it was so hard to tell who was, even from my 82nd deployment, which is very early on before the main IED threat started. Like, it was hard to tell who's who. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you, the guy shooting at you could be a 13-year-old kid,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll kill you just as quick as a 25-year-old guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but by the time I was in special operations, I, we didn't face that as much. Like, I looked at it as more. I saw true evil. Like, the guys we were going after were evil,
Mm-hmm.
and they would do some of the worst things imaginable. Uh, and so I had no problem doing what we had to do, because
Mm-hmm.
my job was to bring my guys home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so if I need to be on a gun to bring my guys home, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I saw, like, we've seen guys with their kneecaps drilled out with a power drill. We saw guys strapped to old bed springs and electrocuted because they had worked with us. We multiple heads chopped off, all kinds of stuff. They would go into a family's house who had no, like, the guy was just a shop owner. He wasn't even committed to one side. He was just trying to live, and they would go into his house and take his family as hostages, knowing we were coming, and they would stand behind the women and kids because they knew we weren't going to shoot the women and kids if we could help it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know if you ever seen the movie Gross Point Blank.
Mm-mm.
Um, it's an older movie, but and funny, it's about a guy who's a contract killer, but his rationalization is, if I'm coming after you, chances are you did something to bring us here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of always the way I looked at it, especially for us. Like, if the National Mission Force is coming after you, like the most highly trained guys in the United States and all their assets, if they're coming after you, you're not innocent.
Yeah.
Um, and so I didn't face that moral injury of having to know that, hey, this kid had nothing to do, but he was going to go hook up this wire. that's an IED wire that's going to kill somebody, and you've got to smoke that kid, or
Mm-hmm.
10 of your guys get eaten up.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't face that nearly as much. I've treated kids that got caught in crossfires and that kind of thing, and that was always hard. Like I tell my wife even now, like she'll ask me if one of our kids is sick. I'm like, honey, I don't do kids. Like I don't like doing kids. Never have. I like kids. I don't like to work on. 'Em.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't face that moral conundrum um, that I think a lot of other guys have and have been put into because of the situations that they were in.
Yeah, you know, I saw this video yesterday, and it was a very large group of Muslim people in Times Square, and they're screaming about Islam and Allah and all the things, and about how this religion needs to be in every home in America, and yada yada yada. And it was talking about the historical documents that kind of talk about the takeover of countries through the Muslim religion, and how there's a system that's used in each country. That, 600 years ago there was no Muslim countries, zero.
Mhm.
And now there's quite a few. And I'm sitting here in this kind of this, I think, a conundrum that any true believer would have, of what's the difference between loving your enemy and recognizing that it's an enemy. You know what I mean? And then what do you do, right? So, like, you could read David and what God asked David to do to his enemies, and then you come to Jesus, and then what do I turn the other cheek? Do you allow this to happen? And kind of, I don't think that the people that live in America day to day have a true fear of what life will be like if the Christian religion is abolished. What the country was built on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think it that is a large conundrum, and especially because the 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 separate sects of Islam, right? The Wahhab versus Salafi. Um,
Can you explain that to me a little bit?
so the Wahhab is a much more militant, kill 'em all sect, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the easiest way to kind of explain it is almost like a denomination,
Okay.
right? Southern Baptist First Church of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the Salafi are not, they are not a uh, proselytized by violence
Mm-hmm.
sect, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Wahhab is, and they're defenders of it on each side, but if you look at historical data, the Wahhab is a proselytized by violence.
Mm-hmm.
So we will give you a choice, but if you choose incorrectly, then your life is forfeit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I
And
think
this
that
comes from the Quran, I guess.
it. So yes, it's in the Quran, just like God telling the Israelites to wipe out every man, woman, and child, donkey, dog, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that phrasing is in there, but then as the sects of Islam have split, then one has chosen to be much more literal and militant about how they carry out what that is.
Mm-hmm. So
Um,
the Crusades versus modern day Christianity.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Um, and so that's where you see it, and it also comes from America's hubris
Mm-hmm.
to believe that everybody wants to live as we do,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the reason we lost in Iraq. That's the reason we lost in Afghanistan. That's the reason we lost in Vietnam, right?
Mm-hmm.
America believed that they wanted what we had, and especially in Afghanistan, they have no concept of what we have.
Mm-hmm.
It literally doesn't compute. So, like, we want to give you democracy is like saying we want to give you a unicorn. Like
Yeah.
they have no concept of what that means. And so I think America's, especially the people of America living under the freedoms that have been provided, don't have a concept of what that separation looks like,
Yeah.
right? Because I can go to Jordan, uh, even Egypt, some of the other places, and nobody's going to want to chop my head off walking down the street,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just because I'm an American. So you would see that as more of the Salafi, like they live their Islamic faith, they will proselytize, but they don't believe that you should die because you don't believe as they do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you go to other places up in the, in the tribal areas in Pakistan, Afghanistan under the Taliban, of course, those kind of places where the, your existence is anathema to theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where that kind of that line draws, and it's pitiable that people do not understand that. And like I've fought beside guys who are practicing Muslims, and would fight beside them again. Um, and I have no issues with that. Um, it's just a completely separate set of belief systems that Americans don't understand because they choose not to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They take whatever they're told as a generalization that does not exist.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. It's the same way with Christians.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Yeah.
same way. It's the same way with anything. And I heard it said best by a guy named Jamie Winship. He said, you know, Christian, Muslim, atheist, they're all gang names. It's the kingdom of God or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And my step further with that is Baptist, Church of Christ, Methodist. They're all gang names. It's the kingdom of God or it's not. And I just, I spent a lot of time. I talked at a cowboy church this weekend, or I preached, I guess, and I was talking about belief, and I kind of preached on the passage in Matthew talking about the sheeps and the goats and how God's going to separate them. And you know, I said that there's 5.1 million people that live in the state of Alabama, and of that 5.1 million, 3.7 million proclaim Christ as their savior. And that is not the experience if you go to the Walmart. And, you know, there might be 100,000 sheep that live in Alabama. And then that would leave us with 3.6 million goats. And the same rings true for the United States of America. There's 340 million people that live here. 220 million say they're Christians. Why do we have the problems that we have? Well, because they're goats, dude. They're not followers of Christ. They're not Christians. They don't take care of people around them. They don't love people. They live in a separation worldview where there's not enough to go around and I got to get what's mine and damn everybody else. And this is why people don't like Christians. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard to not blame them, or it's hard not to agree on some degree. And it's no different. I think it boils down to, and this is a heart issue I've been having um, with the Muslim religion in and of itself, because I don't know, there's turn the other cheek, but there's also you must defend your family from the lies of the world. And yesterday we were at this indoor playground and this gal comes in that works there, full Muslim garb. Boom, right in the middle of Alabama, got the head thing on, the whole nine. And I'm like, what is happening here? And I looked at her hands. She's lily white, dude. She's whiter than me. No, you know what I'm saying? And this woman, I immediately was on the defense, like almost angry internally. And I was like, Lord, what is this? Like, why am I mad at this poor lady who, like, why do, in my heart, do I hate this woman? And just because of what she's wearing and what she believes, that is not the posture that I should take. There's no, she's, I'm sure this other group of Muslims that you're talking about that just live life and don't hate me, you know what I'm saying? And so it brings me back to a person's fruit. The character of a person is what we should look at. It has nothing to do with anything that they are other than they're a child of God and what's their fruit. And that those lines become very muddied when your country has been at war, which it feels like a religious war. Like when you talk about it, like that's what it
Oh,
feels like.
it's I think it's been by especially by the folks on the right, it is has been couched as that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and because nobody wants to see or take the time to see the nuance of like, yes, it is a religious war to them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an ideological war, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily religious. It's ideological war. Um, and so I see the same things, and it's I'm very much of the same thing of show me what you show me what you say,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're gonna say it, show it to me, and if you're not, it's don't say you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of it's the old cowboy thing, right? You know, you can talk a big game, but it's gonna come out
Mm-hmm.
when things get a little bit dicey. Um, so I see that as a struggle for the American made, but it's also a Christian struggle where it's again you like the gang mentality of you know these people over here believe this one thing, these people over here believe this other thing, but if and my dad always said if it doesn't line up with what's in the Bible, whatever anybody's saying, if it doesn't line up with what's in the Bible, then it's not correct.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just that's as simple as that.
What's the truth and where's the truth come from?
Yeah,
you know,
and
I mean, really.
we I had this discussion because I was going to a church in high school with one of my friends, and that pastor was very much the King James version of the Bible was the only version of the Bible that was true, the only translation that was true. And my dad and I were talking about that, and Dad said, "Well, here's the deal. It boils down to this: that you either believe that God is all powerful, or you do not.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you believe that God would allow the message of His word to be changed through an interpretation, then you believe God is not all powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So, how people interpret things can vary word to word, phrase to phrase, but if the message does not change, then the message does not change. So, you either
Mm-hmm.
believe God's all powerful or you believe God can allow His word to be corrupted by
Yeah.
a translation. And then you don't believe in the same God I believe in.
Me and your dad would get along really well. I'm telling you, because that's exactly, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I read the NIV. You know why? Because it's easier for my stupid self to understand. I mean, really, like, and I've read probably every version. I got an app on my phone that's got all the versions, but the fact
Yeah.
is, like, sometimes I don't understand it in one. And like 3:10 is named after Philippians 3:10, but specifically the amplified version of that.
Hmm.
Because it's, I mean, it's deep. It's deep in there, and I just it's one of those deals, man, where and I watch a lot of old war movies and stuff, and like I mean, wasn't Hitler a proclaimed Christian?
You could say that, yeah. But
And Pro
again,
Dog was
like,
not a Christian. You know what
right.
I'm saying? Like, we're out there killing those guys, and they think, I mean, I don't know that to me is the point of all of it. Is like you said, it's theological, not religious. It is you're doing evil things. Everybody knows this to be a sin. Like if you know the good you ought to do and you do not do it, it is a sin for you. That's James 4:17. So
Yeah.
if you're watching a guy kill children and you don't do anything, that is a sin for you, in my opinion. Everybody knows that is not what it's not what we do. Better to be Sodom and Gomorrah than the people who hurt children. I mean, that came out of Jesus's mouth. So if God so chooses you to rain down Sodom and Gomorrah on somebody doing that to somebody, I think that's well within the biblical rights to go in and defend the weak. I mean, I think that's what we're supposed to do as men. Um, but dang it, man, like it's just it's very difficult to look at the country that we live in, look at the things that are happening in Europe, and and choose to not categorize everybody. I think this is the will of the enemy, is to force you into a spot to where you're categorizing everyone in the same genre and hating that
Hmm.
instead of looking, is that a good guy or is that a freaking bad guy? You
But
know,
it's it's always been a one of the easiest tricks of Satan because I can I can put off that on somebody else,
mm-hmm,
right? I like that's something for somebody else to deal with, or that's
mm-hmm,
something for somebody else to take charge of, and so it is a very selfish thing, which is the easiest sin to fall prey to, right?
mm-hmm,
To not take action when it is required. The mental gymnastics that you can do there are pretty easy once Satan has a foothold of, but it doesn't matter to you,
mm-hmm,
right? Um, and I tell my boys, I don't care what somebody looks like, whatever. Who are they? What do they do?
mm-hmm.
Right? Acta non verba. It is what you do and how you live. And Jesus was the same way. Like Jesus could see that all these people he was hanging out with, he knew where their hearts were,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew they were making bad decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't tell them from the time he met them that you're you're a terrible person, your decisions are terrible,
Yeah.
right? He said, I love you and I'll feed you and I will take care of your needs to the best of my ability. This is not the way you should do this.
Mm-hmm. Come follow me.
Come follow me. It's a woman at the well, right?
Yep.
uh it's the prostitute that he kept from being stoned.
Mm-hmm.
Go and sin no more,
Yep.
right? that's that's what I'm asking you to do. And I think it's the same way that we see people, if they can put it off on somebody else to take care of
Yep.
or to make a decision, then they will. um and that was an advantage of being in that seat for so long in the military, of like it. I'm more of an Isaiah 6:8, right?
Yeah.
I'll go, I got it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's probably caused quite a bit of stress in my own family. But that's always been how I saw it. I'll go do it. If it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be hard, I got it,
Mm.
because I know what the cost is. I'm prepared to pay, but it has to be done. So I'll take it.
Yeah. What's So how long were you in total?
I was in 14 years active, and then I did the rest in the guard. Um, so I think it was like 22 years total.
Mm-hmm. And you've been married for what, 23 years, 22 years?
20 years. 20 years
Nice.
this year. Yep.
So what are some lessons learned there? Did you have any trouble with your wife leaving that much and all the things, or was she a believer
So
when you got married?
yes, yes.
That helps.
I'll tell you that the troubles don't, for a lot of people, not that's generalization. For a lot of people, the troubles don't happen while you're on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it's such a fast pace that for years it's like a honeymoon, right? You're home for a couple of weeks and you're gone, then you're home for a couple of weeks and you're gone, right? So like there's never any chance for friction to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it also, especially on our end of the spectrum, is what caused the most problems in our lives was that every time you go, I update my will, I update my death photo, like I plan my funeral, make sure nothing's changed, and so when we say goodbye and I go get on a rotator, that's a separation that I could die within 16 hours. I could be dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the most trouble we faced was the distance that created between us during that time,
Mm-hmm.
because it forces you to kind of stay distant. Because if I try to keep that relationship and do that, then from my end, right, as the guy going down range, I know it's going to be harder on her when I get killed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because my friends and I we buried a buddy a couple of years ago, and we all got together at his funeral, and we were talking about it, and none of us expected to live past 30.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was just we said like my count right now is at like 49 or 50 guys that I've known personally that are dead.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you've watched friends just boom, 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 they're dead. So we never expected to live, and it was easier to operate if you're already dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about that. I don't hold my life dear. I can just go do the job. Um, and so that creates a separation between you and your spouse, where they've had to do most of the stuff on their own. You've been operating over here, and that separation that it creates between you and in your relationship of out of force of habit, not talking about hard stuff, not talking about how you feel, what you see, um, because neither of you want to bring it up because you could be dead in a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so that's what we faced the most after I got off the train. Because we did the math in 13 and I ended up getting out in 14. But I had been home 2 consecutive months and right at a decade. Um, so
That is
we had
insane. What's that rebuild look like? You just start dating again, or what?
um, it is very hard, um, because you have to be honest with yourself, be honest with each other. Of like, you've got to go back and build a new relationship because both of you are different people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was the hardest rebuild for us. And in that, taking somebody who has been, I was a tier 1 guy. Like, you couldn't go any higher in the job than what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you step off that train and the train's gone. They don't care that you're not on the train. And all of your buddies who are still going are still going.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that guilt from you of, I'm leaving them hanging,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what they're walking into. But having to transition back to, okay, if my family is what I say is most important, I've got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
and struggling with that, and then who you are, what you do after that. I think it's taken us quite a few years to build, and we're in a good place now. There's always going to be, through each relationship, times where you're really close, and then times where you are, just as any relationship. But it took us being very intentional and almost coming apart to make the choice that this is what we said we were going to do. We're going to hold to this, and
Mm-hmm.
however hard that is, we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that struggle of leaving that lifestyle, because for me, I can't tell my wife or kids what I do or where I'm going,
Yeah.
right? And so it becomes a habit of just not talking or communicating anything,
Mm-hmm.
because you're so used to just not
Doing it.
telling them anything,
Yeah.
right? So your relationship becomes very superficial, and then if anything hard happens, then you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So that has been the biggest struggle for us, and fight for us to come out the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. And most guys don't. Most guys
I
don't.
it's it is definitely not easy, um, but for me it was like a gut check of, if I said that I'm the guy who wants the hard stuff for all these years,
Mm.
I'm not gonna bitch out now.
Yeah.
Like, what am I
No.
showing my kids,
Mm-hmm.
that if things get hard and I pop smoke,
Yeah.
like, if my job given to me by God is to be a husband and a father, then that's the wrong answer for me. So whatever hard it takes for me, that's what I choose.
100%. The selfishness that we crave, the comfort that we crave in the selfishness is the flesh. And the battle is against the flesh. It's against oneself to be comfortable. And the beautiful thing about God and what he offers is that if you're willing to allow that flesh to die, the comfort he provides is everlasting. And
Yeah,
I mean here on earth. I don't even mean in heaven. Once you choose to let all your selfishness just fall to the wayside and go, all right, Lord, I'll do it your way. He has this way of making really hard things not so hard
yeah.
anymore.
Well, and I don't think it's that they're still really hard, but would you rather go run 20 miles of fence by yourself, or would you rather go run 20 miles of fence with somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, the job is still hard
Yeah.
and it still sucks, but it's better because there's somebody there with you. When you get tired, they can pick up the post hole diggers.
Mm-hmm.
When you cut your hand and you got to bandage it, they can keep going. Like, I think it's also like a misnomer that a lot of folks see, especially newer Christians, when they look at, like, well, now I'm a Christian, nothing should ever be hard again,
Oh,
right?
yeah. That
Um,
is a lie.
and God never said it wasn't going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
He just said, "I will leave you, I will not forsake you."
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's that's why the hard stuff seems easier, I think, because I can remember going through trainings and being muddy and wet and cold and so sore I could barely walk, and still being able to laugh because there was somebody right of me and somebody left of me that they were in it too.
Yeah.
And no matter what, I could look left and I could look right, and they weren't going to quit
Mm-hmm.
unless I quit. And I'm looking at them being like, I'm not going to quit unless they quit. And so we just keep pushing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what God calls us to do as Christians, and especially as husbands and fathers. Of things aren't going to be easy, but if you're there with them and it's bad, then you're bad together,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just keep going because the other person ain't going to quit, and they know you're not going to quit, so you just keep moving.
That's the whole heart behind this podcast, and that's why I named it what I did. Is the art of suffering is there's an art to it, and there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it well, and
Mm-hmm.
the the biggest lie from the enemy is that you're alone, and you're not. And not only, you can insert Christ into that hole, and he needs to be there for you to suffer well. But the fact of the matter is that every single person you come in contact with on a daily basis is suffering in some degree or another. And if we become soft to this suffering and approach it with not a, well, my suffering is greater, it's a, we're down here together and this place freaking sucks, dude. Like, we got to survive it well, in order for our children to grow up and have a chance, for our wives to have fulfilling lives. The only thing that makes sense is to lock arms and go, all right, let's freaking get through the trench together. And that's what the enemy doesn't want. The enemy hates this. He hates your family. He hates you. He hates the brotherhood. And because it is contradictory to what he wants, which is all that destroyed. So it's a really, it sounds like a really sombering thing, and because it's hard, and that's the point, is your life's going to be hard regardless. It's promised. It's a
Yeah,
guarantee. So I don't know. It's interesting. And with that being said, it sounded like us visiting at the clinic that you're kind of into some of that. Like, you're teaching people about horsemanship and this sort of deal that helps prepare people for these hard times, correct?
yeah. I mean, I've worked with a lot of kids. I taught at a alternative high school that had that was housed on a therapeutic riding center, and so part of that was they would come and help me in the barn. Um, and when I got there, they had like this whole class structure of like learning all the different parts of the horse and all these academic things. And I looked at it, and I looked at the kids that I was seeing, and I was like, they don't need another class. They just need to learn how to be humans who can keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I teach them stuff, but it was always stuff that we were doing. Like, you would just come, we would go to work. Like,
Yeah.
every day, every time they would come out for their class period with me, we would just work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we, I worked with them. And if it was cold and rainy and nasty and crappy, we were out there working in the cold and rainy and nasty and crappy. And if they were having a bad day, then I would tell them that luckily they didn't have to change pants. Like, they could get happy in the same pants they were pissed off in, because I didn't particularly care. We still had work to do.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that, and part of kind of the blessing of being raised by a cowboy, and learning the horsemanship side as I kind of grew up, was that I could be able to see where that lesson would help them, and where working that specific horse or this specific way or doing this job, I could kind of get a point across to them a little bit easier. And I it was, I think, beneficial, because I still talk to some of them, that that they learn more about how to deal with bad stuff
Mm-hmm.
in barn than they did going to therapists or anything, because I never felt. Well, I guess I didn't feel sorry for them. I never told them that everything was going to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
or that they could act however they wanted because of all the bad stuff that had happened to them.
Yeah.
And part of that was just being a realist, right? Like nobody is going to care how you grew up or what bad stuff happened to you if you just meet them. Like you don't get to treat people crazy because you had a bad childhood. They
Mm-hmm.
don't know anything about that. So my my goal with them was to be like, I know that bad stuff's happened to you. I know you've got a raw deal, uh, and that sucks. That shouldn't happen, but it did. And the only thing you have any control over is how you go forward.
Yep.
And that was, I think, that was part of God's getting me back in line was hearing myself preach that message over and over to the kids,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then being able to take what I had been taught and give it to them, and them see that even if it was for 6 or 8 hours a day, there was somebody who actually cared
Mm-hmm.
and would do what they said they were going to do,
Yep.
even if they didn't hug me all the time and feel sorry for me. And
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
so that was a very valuable experience, and I consulted for a couple of different veterans organizations and helped a couple of others try to start up stuff, and it's the same principles that I was teaching those kids, the same thing that you know I learned myself of you. The hard's the hard. It ain't gonna get easier by not dealing with it, and the easiest way to deal with it is to have somebody else there with you and keep going.
The testimony of each person is designed, in my opinion, to proclaim the glory of God, regardless of what is believed, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. And one of the lies from the enemy is he'll make you feel shameful of this. If something happens to you, or there's suffering that you've endured that God's helped you overcome, is that you can't share the story. You can't tell them. You can't tell people what's happened because of X, Y, and Z. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
lie is inserted in the story is what proclaims God's glory. That's what changes people's lives, right?
Yep.
It's the actual walking out of the gospel, of the lessons learned, and his goodness at the end. And there's not a thing that has happened to me in my life that I can't tie back to God, that God is good, the good,
Mm-hmm.
the bad, and the ugly. And I think perseverance and grit is just something every person needs. It's just part of living on earth, is learning these things. But for our determined purpose is to come to know the King, share in his sufferings in order to be transformed into his likeness. If you never find yourself at a point where you need God, then why do you need God?
Yeah.
That's the point. So we have to shift our viewpoint on suffering from something that has happened to me to something that is shaping me, molding me, transforming me. It's training for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if we maintain this heart posture towards our suffering, it's a weapon.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's something that's honed. So I agree with you 100%. It doesn't matter what's happened to you. God is still good. And it doesn't matter what's going to happen to you, because it's coming. If you have not suffered in your life yet, you will. I promise. It is biblical truth. And as long as you know where to run. And I had a guy ask me one time, my college fishing partner's dad, he was like, "Do you think Daniel is a Christian?" Do you think he's a believer? And he wasn't walking in the faith. He was living his own life. And I told Jeff, and I was young at the time. I was probably in my early 20s. And I said, man, I said, as long as Daniel knows where to go when the shit hits the fan, he's going to be okay. And that's the classic, raise them up in the way they should go and they will not depart from it. Um, the prodigal son, so to speak. And that's what happened to me. That's what happens to most men in their life. They grow up if they're trained well. If not, they find it later in life. But it's knowing where to go.
Mm-hmm.
When the bullets start flying, where does that mind go? Because if it goes to yourself, you will fail. In the end, once you get to the end of that self, is where you'll find Christ. Once that flesh starts dying, you know.
Yep.
But anyways, you got any parting words for the team here? Any life lessons that we haven't talked about that you want to impart on the listeners of the Art of Suffering?
So one of the greatest quotes that I ever got, and I can't remember exactly where it comes from. I know Tommy DiTomaso likes to say he invented it, but I don't know if he did or not. Um, Especially as a man, um, you can delegate authority, but not responsibility. And that, if you follow that quote out, you can relate it to a lot of different stuff in your life. Um, that who do you give authority to do things, uh, and then who is overall responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I I share that with a lot of people talking about leadership and leadership development. Of you can delegate authority, but you can't delegate responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just becomes, are you willing to be responsible?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am.
Yep.
But is everyone else? That's
Yeah.
really good. I've never heard that before. That's that's deeper than you'd think it'd be if you get to chewing on that one a little bit. Because
Yeah.
that's true. That's very, very true. That's like delegating your authority over your kids to their teachers or to the church or to your wife. Um, but at the end of the day, that's your fruit. Uh, that's your fruit out
You
there.
are responsible to God for what He has given you in charge of,
Mm-hmm.
and you can delegate authority as you see fit because He lets you. But you are the answer. And
Damn. Woo. That's pretty good, man. Golly. Yeah, that's a good one. Me and my wife are in the old, I'm wanting to homeschool the boys, and she doesn't really want to. Doesn't feel like we have the time. And I'm getting real close to my hey, we're just going to do what I'm feeling here because it's on my heart, and I want them here with me, and we'll get it figured out as far as. I mean, there's so much curriculum and stuff nowadays that pretty much anybody can homeschool. But I feel like I'm giving away all my time with my men, and I'm having to combat some BS that I don't want to have to. You know what I mean? Uh, there's no need for it. God gave me too good a youngin to let somebody pour some stupidness into his head, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned that he's missing out on because he's sitting at the lunch table goofing off with his buddies, and I really feel like I just want him here with me. That's kind of what it boils down to. But that's exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, and it's you can choose that as a, I've got kids from 16 down to 2 now. We've got younger foster kiddos, and it's you can choose with your wife how you guys want to do that, but it's you're answering to God for it. And I would also say that, as you look at that schooling and what they are exposed to, um, I'll give you a preacher's kid's perspective on that. Um, if they are never exposed to the garbage, they will not know that it's garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they never hear a conflicting perspective, they will not know how to combat a conflicting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's one of the things that I think my dad did well, and I was taught well, was you you have to be able to defend your beliefs, and if nobody ever challenges your beliefs, then when dad's not there to do it, and when dad's not there to lean on, I can tear you apart
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't built your own coping mechanisms when you could go to dad and be like, "Hey, dad, why is this way?"
Mm-hmm.
And dad could be like, "Hey, I heard, I know you hear that, and here's what I'm going to tell you about that."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's I think also an important thing as they grow to be able to say, "Be in the world, but not of the world," right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's they are homeschooled and they travel with you and they get to see other stuff, but always developing in them the ability to say, I know you see this, and this is how the world is going to portray this.
Mm-hmm.
Here is what we believe and why we believe it, and why we think it will be better if you do or don't do this, because this is what God says about it. Um, and that has served me very well in my own life at times and in my kids, because they can come and have a conversation with me and be like, what do you think about that? And I've had to practice my like straight face a few times of like, huh, that sounds interesting. Um,
I can only imagine.
but then being able to like, okay, what do you think? And developing a critical thinker is, I think, one of our main jobs as men and our
Mm-hmm.
children, um, because
I do agree with that.
if they can't if they can't see both sides of an issue, uh, and know how each side thinks, then it's real easy for someone else to pick them apart
Mm-hmm.
because they haven't thought it through and how to think critically about things and logically and take it to its conclusion. And uh, it's very important, I think.
I agree with that. That's where you wind up with a guy like me, hating the other side because you don't understand it.
Yeah, and
You,
it's one of the things that I fought growing up and seeing different things, and these people believe this just crazy whacked out stuff, and like that doesn't make any sense. Why do you believe that? And never got any further down and be like, tell me what you think,
yeah.
defend your point,
Mm-hmm.
and let me listen to it without emotion so that I can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, I see how you could believe that. And I think it's important for us to be like, I see how you could think that. I don't believe you're correct,
Mm-hmm.
but I see how you could think that. And I see how you could think that. I don't believe you're correct, but let's have dinner.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take your coffee. Let's,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to have differing viewpoints, but still be cordial and maintain that relationship is another lost or losing art, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Still be able to love people.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Dude, what a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on. Um,
Yeah.
and sharing lessons learned and stories. That's really cool, man. And we don't always get to hear the perspectives of the men and women who've gone over there and done the really really hard things for us. And from me and everybody listening, man, we sure do appreciate your sacrifices and your commitment to freedom and to the relationship with your wife. That is an unbelievable story, that out of that deal, that you were able to work through those things. Guys, as always, if you need me, you can reach out. Dalton at 310edu.com is my email. My phone number is on the website if you need that. We'll see you in the next episode. Never weaken.